My name is JasonCytacki. I was born and raised in South Bend, Indiana. I received my MFA from the University of Notre Dame. And most recently I moved to Norman, Oklahoma, where I'm an assistant professor of painting at the University of Oklahoma. My training has been very traditional in terms of how to construct a painting. The people I always looked up to in undergraduate, and I would say even part of grad school, were very traditional painters like Rubens, Rembrandt, Titian. You can name the kind of old masters, if you were. And I was always drawn to sort of the Baroque kind of style, the chiaroscuro lighting and tenebrism and all those sort of elements that made those paintings so dramatic. I watched a lot of cowboy films growing up, albeit maybe not the classics per se, but there's always been a stream of Western films and Western influences within popular culture. So, the influence I had were like a TV show named Young Riders, which was a '90s show, and this great cartoon called Cowboys of Moo Mace, which were cowboys that were actually cows. It's a horrible pun for a show, but I quite enjoyed it. And even like Back to the Future 3, where it's taking place in the West. So there was all these kind of streams of the West and the cowboy hero kind of coming in and out of my childhood, and I really related to those heroes, and I saw them really similar to the other people I enjoyed at the time. Batman, Superman, Spider-Man. These sort of loner masculine heroes who perform these heroic deeds, and so I've always had this fascination with that character. And so, fast forwarding many years into, where I'm in graduate school now, I started to really get interested in Americana and, kind of examining my own identity as, a white male from a Midwestern town, and that I've constructed my identity sort of around these sort of American ideals. And so the work started to get into these suburban communities and, things from my childhood, these toys that I grew up with. And I felt that the cowboy was sort of, in essence, the thing that I was missing that I really wanted to work with. That, hero who influenced so much of the way I saw the world. And, in addition to that, there was this idea that the cowboy is not only a personal fascination, but it was also this symbol of something greater than that, symbol of America. If you go to Europe or anywhere else, we oftentimes associate the cowboy as being this very, very important symbol of what America is about. I would say even in the political climate of the time, the cowboy was brought up a lot with sort of things that were going on in the country. So I wanted to kind of appropriate that symbol and re-examine it and show a different side of it, show a more complex nature to this hero that I thought was so meaningful. For my thesis project, I worked a lot with toys and dioramas that I would set up, creating props for, creating a lot of the environments. This work itself revolved around the cowboy hero and kind of positioning them in these suburban settings that I created. So in order to do that, I wanted to create these larger narratives, but without actually working with real people. I wanted to be able to create environments that I could assemble the pieces for and work with these small actors who were in real life actually toys. So I created a small stage that was about a couple of feet large, but it gave me some parameters that I had of sizes. So I had, my actors were Ken and G.I. Joe and Johnny West. So limiting these kind of masculine toy heroes that either I grew up with or were hand-me-downs from my parents or were indicative of, the kind of toys that I played with growing up. And then I would construct sets for them, almost like you would on a movie, a movie set or in a movie production, where I had a backdrop, I had props, I had cardboard mountains, cardboard trees, those kind of things, using a process that was somewhat of the process that a kid would make a movie with. The sophistication of my materials and my techniques weren't the most eloquent, but I think for me it was part of the fun of getting outside of the way that I typically work, which is very kind of obsessive and compulsive about being very detailed with my finished products in the paintings. So finding a way to balance my need for detail with kind of a more intuitive process. I would take these toys, these settings, put them together, and create these little narrative scenes that would kind of give life to the ideas that I had regarding the concepts of the cowboy. And so it was pretty intuitive at that point that I started off with an idea of, I want to have the cowboy walking through this scene, but the script I had in my head was somewhat loose, so that I let the toys and the environment kind of interact, and I would position them one way, take some photos, and then I would try it a different way, try moving the props around to get it to the point where I was really happy with the finished scene. As I mentioned, photography came into that. I would photograph these scenes with a digital camera, really working with lighting and color, trying to get a result that I was happy with in terms of what could eventually become a painting. So as I was working, I had to figure out scale. I was working with larger clamp lights, and then I realized that since my actors were yay big, I had to kind of scale down everything I was using, including lights. So I found little bike helmet lights and LED lights, colored light bulbs, and it was really kind of a learn-as-you-go kind of process, which I feel kind of fed into the work and kind of gave it the kind of unexpected, fluid feeling that I think that the finished paintings have kind of embedded in them. Once I finished setting it up, I would then take multiple photographs, different angles, different positions, and then I would use those as the source materials for the large paintings. So once I finished the dioramas, I would move on to the actual canvas I was working with, which were about 5 foot by 7, which are pretty large canvases, which made me have to reconfigure kind of the way that I worked. I traditionally worked with smaller sizes, 11 by 14, 16 by 20, but working on that scale required a little bit different of a process involved. So, I would have several different photo sources that I would work from. I would lay it out on the canvas, kind of do a general underpainting, and then really just, start getting with color and detail, and the whole painting process would take over. And so once it got to the canvas, that's where the fun began, so to speak, that I really did enjoy putting paint on the canvas, moving it around, modeling forms. I mean, that's a blast for me. I always definitely see a sort of tension in the work between process and the painting itself. And it's something that I've really worked with in trying to create different reads from different distances within the work. I'm definitely the type of person who really gets invested in one piece and really wants to spend time. And if I don't check myself, I'll end up spending 4 hours without noticing the time fly by painting a small passage on one of these paintings. But like I said, there is definitely a tension between the, looking at the painting from 2 inches away from it or from across the room. And in some of the works, I really wanted to play with that tension of how, if you are from across the room, you might get one sort of an image. You might take in these toys or these, constructed environments and mistake them possibly even for being real. And then once you sort of get closer to the canvas, you start to notice more and more details, the kind of the artificiality of the environments, or that instead of a real person, that's actually a Ken doll, or that mountain is really just a piece of cardboard I've painted with a couple different colors. And for me, the real joy was to get involved in creating those textures, really spending hours painting cardboard, which for some might sound like the most boring task in the world. But for me, that's where the enjoyment happens, is really getting involved with the paint. That having an idea and visualizing that idea, but then also the process, I would say is integral to the whole piece itself, that they would become very different if, I would handle the paint differently, or if I approached the process of creating that image in a different way. And I think that in any sort of painting, that or artwork in general, I say the process and the content are always so, they work together to create something larger themselves, and that's what I hope that my paintings do in the end.